I feel like I've taken calculated bets all my life, right? Like was born in this like conservative family, never left her hometown before, suddenly decides to go to America and become the first person from the entire family to go out of the country, right? It was a very important motivator for me because it allowed me to really see the world and really expand my viewpoint of where I fit in into the world.
I'm Cameron Peake, a partner with Restive Ventures, and I'm thrilled today to have Nami Baral, who's the founder and CEO of Niural here today. Nami is a second-time founder, just an inspiration, and so I'm really excited to have a conversation today. So welcome, Nami.
Thank you so much, Cameron. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So I'd love to just start out. Tell us who you are, a little bit of your background. I know you've started 2 companies before, and tell us about what you're building now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company that I'm currently building is Niural. Niural is named after neural networks, which are one of the essential components that lend itself to artificial intelligence. Niural, in its heart, is an AI company that is built for modern global payroll. Right. So, and part of the inspiration behind why I built Niural has really come from my prior experience building my first fintech company, where I got the opportunity to really, do a deep dive on the entirety of, I guess, fintech stack that is used by both on like B2C startups as well as B2B startups. And especially if you are in fintech anywhere, you know just how critical payroll as a data point is when you're building anything related to finance. It is one of the most important things that is that influences somebody's life if you are an employee, and for the employer, SG&A and especially payroll is one of the most important costs that you have to deal with, and all of it has to deal with your most important resource in your company, which is your people. And during that time, when I realized that it is such a crucial form of data, but the companies that actually serve this particular industry are actually extremely antiquated and have dinosaur rails from everything from their payment stack to the way they do tax calculations to remittances to the way they handle or not handle the changing needs of the global workforce that we know today. That really inspired me to build something that can be a generational company and that can be a payroll company that can last the next 100 years. So that's what we have built at Niural.
Amazing. And this isn't your first go around. So I'd love to dig into, you've clearly made multiple commitments to be an entrepreneur. Has this always been a motivation of yours? Would love to hear more about that.
My journey actually, started very, very early, I guess like back in the day when I was not even in the US at all. I was born and raised in Nepal. Nepal, as you may know, is a developing country, nestled between India and China. And, it lives in obscurity most of the times, unless somebody talks about Mount Everest. And so growing up in Nepal, I was, I always thought I'd be a doctor. Right? Like, if you're good at your studies and you're in Asia, everybody, anticipates that you're going to be a doctor. And that's what, you think you're going to be. But then, when I was in high school, I felt like I had been in Nepal all this time, and I felt like I was living in this small pond, and I truly literally wanted to go out and see the ocean, right? Nepal is a landlocked country, and I wanted to go see the ocean, see the world, experience it for myself, and really take a big leap of faith from the having never left even my hometown before, having never flown on a plane before, and making the decision to actually, okay, you know what, I want to go out and see the world and experience it. And so it was at that point when I decided to actually apply for colleges in the United States, got into Harvard, and then that's what made the move from me moving from Nepal to the United States. Now, the journey of actually changing my career trajectory from being a doctor to later on becoming an entrepreneur was, I think it started when I landed in the US, and it was the last financial crisis. That was the period in which I came to the US. So that was, in my mind, I was coming into this land of opportunity, expecting a better roses. This is the place where everybody wants to be, this economic powerhouse. And I come here and I see, obviously, in the peak of the last financial crisis, lots of people, really losing their homes, losing their jobs, a very, kind of dire situation when you think about it from the perspective of someone who was just expecting just good, right? And so that really inspired me to learn more about how can something like that happen to a powerhouse, an economic powerhouse like the United States. What are the things that moves markets, and how does it ultimately seep into our daily life? So that's when I decided to change my major from pre-med to actually doing applied math and economics. And that set the trajectory to go more into the financial world for me.
What made you go from that to start a company? I mean, you could have gone down a policy route, a number of different ones. What drove you to entrepreneurship?
So I ended up being an investment banker in the formative stages of my career. And at that time, I got the opportunity to work with a lot of different kinds of companies in, just being able to do strategic advisory and M&A related deals for them. And I worked with tech companies very closely in that capacity. In I guess like the very first job that I had after college. And that really inspired me to go into tech, right? Like, not really pursue investment banking as a career, but actually become an operator in tech. And so I decided to leave my investment banking job and join a very early stage startup at that time, which was, it was a pre-revenue company. And I was one of the first people that was like, supposed to be brought in to start generating revenue for that company. And then after that, obviously getting to work within in a startup environment, being able to see the ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and experiencing the success of that startup. The startup was acquired by Twitter very shortly afterwards, and I got the opportunity to just once again be in an environment where I was seeing startups convert into larger companies, and over time, really experience both the pains of growing and scaling, but also enjoy the ride of being able to create something really iconic and generational, especially at Twitter, right? So that gave me the inspiration to really become not just an early employee at a company, but actually found my own startups. I stayed at Twitter post acquisition for another like 6-7 years, and then in 2018 decided to leave Twitter to start my own company in fintech.
So had you found yourself just kind of getting bored? How long had you been mulling starting your company? What was that? What led up to that moment to decide to actually do it?
I think probably the last 2 years at Twitter, I was continuously thinking about, maybe this particular idea would be interesting and that particular idea would be interesting. And at that time, I was just like, talking to many other founders and talking to founders who had built companies before, talking to the founder whose company I had first joined, and understanding what it means to not just work on an idea, but take it all the way to fundraising, building a team, and really going to market and building a successful company, right? There's plenty of, I think, people who are entrepreneurs, right? They want to start a company just because they want to start a company, but they do not know what it takes, or they're not willing to do what it takes to go all the way through, right? Now, that said, none of those initial plans really worked later on, right? But at the same time, it was not something that I did on a whim, get an idea and tomorrow I'm leaving the company. That was definitely not what was happening. I was definitely experimenting and iterating with a lot of ideas and trying to figure out what is the best way to execute on them.
At what point did you feel like you had it right? Like you had the confidence or the conviction to say, this is it. This is the one I want to pursue and actually jump and do it.
There was lots and lots of work that we had to put in the pipeline. And my main focus at that time was, while we wait to bring this finished product out into the market, what is the most basic form of functionality I can show to my customers so that they can at least start engaging with this platform and get some value while they wait. And so what we did at the time was, created this bare bones MVP where people would be able to connect their bank accounts, and we would be able to, suggest certain kinds of optimizations on their spending insights, and then potentially that could lead to a proper investment decision later on when we actually had the finished product. And during that process is when I realized that when people were connecting their bank accounts and requesting all of these spending related insights that could translate into investment decisions, they were also sharing a lot of transactional data with us. And during that process, I noticed that many of them, even people that I had not anticipated would have those kind of patterns, were paying a lot of money in bank fees, right? There were overdraft fees, there were unintended, credit card late fees, residual interest charges, late fees in mortgages, things like that I was seeing, which was something that, one, unexpected. I didn't expect to see those things from, these were typically well-to-do customers who wanted to do investment through us. And so I was not expecting them to have those kind of fees. And then second, when I alerted them of those kinds of fees and the kind of patterns that I was seeing in their transactions, they actually wanted me to do something about it. Right. So beyond just waiting for that investment platform, they wanted me to help them either negotiate those fees or cut down on those fees and reduce their overall debt profile altogether. So then that led to, okay, customers are asking for this. Let me see what I can do to just make them happy. So then I started creating a negotiation engine that could conduct all of these, fee negotiations automatically. And then when I presented that to customers, that's when I saw, their eyes lit up, and they really loved that particular product.
Given that vulnerability of not bringing in a paycheck and the uncertainty, what gave you that conviction to move, to actually do it? What drove you to do it?
We monetized from the very beginning. Right. So the first customer that I did a negotiation for, the business model was, we take 25% of the savings that we produce. If we do not get you any savings, we do not charge you anything. So it was very much like a value-based model. If I'm able to get you savings, I get paid. Right. And we had even, in the early days, there was roughly about an 80% success rate. And as we optimized the engine, later on, we got to 95% plus success rates, right? So when you see that the product that, you have built is not just some figment of your imagination about helping people, it is actually helping them. And then second, you start generating revenue, however small that might be, that you're onto something. I feel like I've taken calculated bets all my life, right? It goes back to the time when I decided that, this person who had, was born in this conservative family, never left her hometown before, suddenly decides to go to America and become the first person from the entire family to go out of the country, right? That was a very risky bet from the position that I was in at that time to take, but I felt that it was a very important motivator for me because it allowed me to really see the world and really expand my viewpoint of where I fit into the world, right? And second, when I left my investment banking job to join this early stage pre-monetized, pre-revenue startup, I was an H-1B. I was on H-1B visa at that time. I was an international. I got a work permit. I was on H-1B visa. Typically, you do not make a leap from a very safe, cushy investment banking job to a pre-revenue startup. But I looked at the, people that were building the company. I looked at the investors. I looked at the product that was being built, and I felt like I had enough data points to make that calculated risk taking, and it just made sense. And then so I went into that startup, and obviously that bet paid off, and the rest of the I guess tech career trajectory kind of emanated from that particular decision. And so when I decided to leave Twitter, I'd seen enough startups and enough interacted with enough founders to know that unless you are completely dedicated to building a company, you're not going to succeed, right? You cannot, and I still believe that. I'm sure there are certain exceptions to every rule, but unless you're giving your 200% to anything you're doing, you're not going to be successful. So I knew it at that time, like even at the time I was leaving Twitter, that if I am doing a startup, I'm doing it full time and I'm going to give everything that I have to this startup, because if I was distracted, then I knew that I'd not be able to succeed.
I love that. And you'd seen patterns of it working before. So it probably gave you more confidence to try riskier things. Well, I'd love to kind of fast forward with that idea of mindset to your new company. So, Harvest, you built and sold and you had a successful outcome and you decided to jump into it again. So what drove you to go for round two?
When I was selling my last company, I thought at that time, you know what, I'm going to retire and go into politics. That was like what was in my head. I mean, not that like, I truly believed that I was going to retire, but like, at that time you feel like I've given so much energy to, building this company and I want to rest a little bit, right? That was the mindset that I had the day I signed the M&A papers. And about a month in, it didn't even take that long. Like, the founder mentality is one of those things that like, you can't get out, right? Like it's one of those things, once you have been conditioned to look around you and just build things, to solve problems by building things, everything looks, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. With a founder mentality, there's just like 1,000 things that you want to build. And so I became very restless, and I wanted to make sure that I was kind of back into the build zone, because post M&A and especially post acquisition, there's not a lot of true building you'll be able to do. There's a lot of internal finagling and just a lot of like, just I guess management of other things, rather than just truly building products that occupies most of your time. And I didn't particularly enjoy that. I had 1,000 different ideas, so I had to pick one that I was most passionate about. And it's funny because the idea that I picked and idea that I'm most passionate about is payroll, right? So I ended up really focusing on payroll as that industry and really try to figure out what does truly the rails for what payroll needs to look like for the next 100 years. What does it mean to build a product like that? And what does it need to look like, not just from a financial technology stack and payment stack, but from a tax, compliance, and workflow orchestration for companies to scale from really small startups to even large enterprises.
I want to switch gears to fundraising. And so you've gone through this twice now. Tell us both what worked for you in V1, how kind of your second pass at it may have gotten easier or harder. You may have thought about things differently, but would love to understand your philosophy and approach around fundraising.
It took me a while, but then I learned how to, properly do fundraise, in terms of making sure that you have the right kind of documents, making sure that you are going to the right kind of investors that invest in your particular stage, really perfecting the pitch and and the kind of insights that you needed to provide to an investor, especially a very early stage investor, to be able to make a bet on you. Right? It's at that particular stage, it's not so much even about the product or the market or anything else. It's really about making a bet on you and the team. So, it took me a while to understand that. But then once I understood that, the fundraising became easier. Now, second time around, the focus on fundraising was not so much about, hey, can I get the money? Because getting the money was actually the easier part. It was about who are the right investors that we want to bring into this journey, who can actually help me build this company. So I think that became the bigger consideration the second time around. And obviously, second time around, it became faster because I had done several rounds of fundraising before for Harvest. And so I knew how to deal with fundraising. I knew what instruments to work with, and I knew what to negotiate, what to not worry about, and what truly makes sense. What is truly important when you're making a fundraising deal, which is like, how helpful are your investors? shareholders or investors going to be there is a lot more important than who is actually cutting the check.
So Nami, your second time running a company, as you think about just the company building side of things, what have you learned in V1 that you're applying in the second go around?
Yeah. So first time I was a solo founder. Now in this particular company, in my second company, I have 3 other founders. Okay. And so getting help and getting meaningful help is going to just be, it makes your life easy. Second, focusing on product too much versus like taking an MVP approach, right? And that is something that I've done ruthlessly the second time around, especially because payroll is something that has a lot of different components to build, right? It has payments, it has taxes, it has compliance. These days, you can't just build it for employees. You also have to build it for contractors, and you have to, deal with cross-border transfers and lots and lots and lots of different things. So you have to make sure that you're gaining speed while still being able to execute on a lot of different items on your product roadmap. So ruthless prioritization is something that I've done the second time around much better than the first time around.
And tell us about the future of the company. You've given us a glimpse into what you're building now, but where's it going?
There's not a lot of resources that go into running payroll at any company. They may have, it is one of the more understaffed departments at any company, but it is also the most important piece of payment you'll do at the company. So it is all about how can we make the life of that payroll operations person easier? How can we make the life of that HR person who is onboarding new people and bringing them into this journey with that company much easier? So expect Niural to just roll out very, AI integrated products into all parts of the payroll and HR workforce management lifecycle and across all kinds of borders, whether it's state registrations or 50 state taxes or contractor payments in 150 countries. Expect us to be able to do more and more things that take up the entire HR and payroll function versus, just limiting ourselves into just payroll and payments.
Last question. What advice do you have to any women that may be considering jumping into the CEO seat?
Don't get scared. Right. There's lots of women founders that I have mentored. And most of the times what they are really scared about is, am I going to be able to balance work life and my personal life? I'm thinking about getting pregnant. Do I, go and start a company, and do I do fundraising now? What will potential investors think? I want to have another baby. Do I, go ahead and do my startup or no? Do I have to do a startup within the female child, all of those in that particular industry, or can I venture out to do something different? Those are all kinds of questions that I get when I speak to really really amazing, talented, female founders who are, kind of a little bit scared to take the leap. You're never going to get perfect answers and perfect situations, but that is life, right? And that happens whether you are a female founder or not. It's just we just have to deal with more things in our lives, and we also want to balance our personal lives with our work life. So what I say to all of them is, you cannot optimize everything. So when things happen, you have to just kind of go with the flow, but you will be able to handle a lot more than you think that you'll be able to handle, right? So don't let you being a female scare you into being a female founder. I think that is actually an asset and a superpower than anything else.
Nami, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you, and I am so excited to see where you take Niural in the future.
This was so much fun. Thank you for having me, Cameron.
Thanks for watching the show today. For more information, go to restive.com/blog. Check out the show notes, and if you'd like to see future episodes, subscribe on YouTube. Thanks.